for inviting my deputy minister to this conference. Let me apologize to my deputy minister, Braun, who is, of course, a very good specialist in cohesion policy. Yes, at last minute he had to deal with some urgent state business, so I am here instead of him now, and I will try to make some comments for this discussion. First of all, I think it's very good, this conference and the discussion about the key issues related to SEA for cohesion policy, because it's now a question which is arising because the programming of next programming period is starting now. The previous speakers were talking about some issues about the role of SEA in the system of cohesion policy, and I have to say that from practical point of view it is a very important tool, but it should not be a break during the realization of cohesion programming period. For example, now we in Czech Republic we do have some part of revisions of operational programs because of we got some extra money to budget because of the Article 17 interinstitutional agreement. And because of that, we are preparing the revision of operational programs to make to increase their budgets for something. And now the question is this for this revision needed? Yeah, for example, yeah, it is, but the process of doing SEA is rather 6 months long, and it can be very complicating for making this revision. So we are now discussing this, and this is just only small notice to the how to use the SEA during the program period and while practicing the cohesion policy in member states. I'm sorry, I see it from my point of view, and I'm a real practitioner of the cohesion policy on the national level. But back to the questions which were risen up by the chair. What is or what should be the role of CEA in preparation of structural fund programs? Besides eliminating negative environment impacts, as our experience shows, CEA can contribute to better coordination among programming documents in Czech Republic. CEA team for the National Development Plan in last programming period had an intensive communication with CEA team working on CEA for specific operational programs in order to discuss and achieve an agreement on environmental indicators and criteria to be integrated in the overall monitoring system. I'm not quite sure if CEA can take direct responsibility for programming of certain areas. However, it can help to avoid some overlap between documents and sectors. Did CEA for structural funds programs 2007 or 2013 fulfill this role? Why yes, why not? As just mentioned, CEA for the National Development Program as well as CEA for OPs did contribute to better programming process. Among others, CEA facilitated part of consultation with public and NGOs. One of the main preconditions for successful CEA is definitely proper timing. That means launching CEA process together with programming, or at least with only small delay. This was done in case of CEA for the NDP, and therefore CEA could play its role. It's also important to pay special attention when formulating terms of reference for launching CA in public procurement. That should optimally provide a clear guidance for CA in terms of the procedural aspects. Maybe the question relating to the link between CA and ex-ante evaluations. Well, no problem with that. I think it could be done together. But maybe some guidance from EC should be very good for this, because on the national level maybe we need this. Some methodological lessons can be drawn from the midterm review. CA-related issues haven't been addressed in details in midterm evaluations in our case. So I would appreciate comments and ideas from the presentations and after all discussions. And what about the results of CA being used during project preparation and implementation? One of the main outputs from CA for the National Development Programme is the list of environmental indicators, which has been integrated in the overall monitoring system and helps us to evaluate environmental performance of the EU funds implementation in the Czech Republic. This is from my point of view all. As I said, I'm deeply in the implementation of this programming period, and we are now preparing for the next. And the discussion has already started. So this autumn and next season, next year is fully in duty of programming the next period, setting up the new operational programs, and the CA should make a very strong role in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now please, Gordon, take the floor.
Hi, good afternoon. As Martin had said, I'm the Chief Executive of ESET Limited, and perhaps just to explain, ESET Limited is an intermediate body. So we work under contract to Scottish Government, to the managing authorities, in managing and administering the ERDF and ESF operational programmes in Scotland. So that's the context and the basis of which I'm going to respond to the questions where I can and where it's appropriate for me to do so. So it's very much from a practitioner's perspective, and less from the whole the kind of procedural and the kind of actual implementation of SEAs. The other thing I would say is, and I think it's important for me to say, and hopefully I'll develop this in one of the sessions tomorrow, is that we in ESET in Scotland particularly have taken a fairly strong lead and a very strong commitment to mainstreaming sustainable development. It's been mentioned a number of times already this morning, both mainstreaming environmental sustainability and I think Rob specifically mentioned mainstreaming sustainable development. And again, I'd like to make that point quite forcibly, if I may, because if you go back in a policy context over the last 10, 15 plus years, sustainable development was really the kind of driving force. It was the kind of key overarching policy. And since then, it's been disaggregated at different times. There have been specific emphasis placed on climate change for very obvious reasons. We've kept faith with the concept of sustainable development to the extent to which economic, social, and environment come together in a mutually reinforcing way. And sometimes it's often addressed as being overly complex. Well, it's not, and in practice you can deliver on this, and that's what we've been working on since 1998, and continue to work on that. So again, if you'll forgive me, my comments are very much placed in the context of sustainable development, mainstreaming sustainable development, and therefore the role of SEA as a key management tool in delivering sustainable development in the Scottish programmes. So the kind of first question, what is the role of the SEA? Well, I see it as having a key role, key productive role, but it's one of a number of key baseline studies that need to be undertaken in terms of drawing together the programme strategy, the kind of developing the priorities for intervention in the operational programmes. And I think we need to understand that because there is a significant resource required in undertaking all the different studies, bringing them together, coordinating, making sense of them, and then being able to engage in the consultation process. So it's one of a number of key components. But again, its role is to identify the challenges and the opportunities in addressing environmental issues in the design and implementation of the programmes. So it's very fundamental, but it's one of a number of baseline studies. Our experience in Scotland in the current programme period, in the context of the essay that was drawn up in forming and influencing the programme, has not been particularly positive. And I think a lot of the speakers this morning made similar comments. So I'm not here to say what we did was great and we fully took it on board. The answer is we didn't, and there were reasons for that. And I'm not. I choose not to go into the detail of that here and now. But it wasn't. It didn't positively influence. And to the extent that it was a one-off standalone exercise, in effect almost a report that was put on a shelf, and no further cognizance was taken of it in terms of implementing programmes. Our environmental authorities were involved, so from that point of view we were compliant with the SA. They clearly were involved. They commented on the SA, and they had a number of negative comments to make on that. In some cases they were concerned with the lack of consultation in the overall process. But that charge could be made in terms of the overall consultation in the development of the programme. For me, the SEA has a very specific and important role, and it should inform and influence all of the priorities for intervention in the programme, as I said. But it should, in that respect, should be undertaken as an integral component of the ex-ante evaluation. The ex-ante evaluation is a very key role, I think, as anyone involved in programmes knows. And in fact, one of the innovations that was introduced in the 2000-2006 programme period by the Commission was greatly welcome, was the fact that the ex-ante evaluation could operate in parallel with the design and development of programmes. In the past, the ex-ante was undertaken once all of that work was done. Instituted delays. This is an opportunity for these processes, including the SEA, to inform the development of the programme in terms of the priorities for intervention. How do we address these challenges and opportunities, whether they're social, economic, environmental. There is also, and George mentioned this, there is an ongoing need to kind of monitor and evaluate how that's being applied. We've not done that to any great extent, and that's something that really has to be addressed. Again, it has to be a living document, things will change clearly, and it has to be an iterative process. To what extent should future programmes through the SEA address some of the key environmental issues like climate change, biodiversity decline, so on and so forth? Well, SEA almost is a key aspect of that, and by their nature they'll want to address these issues. But again, I would go back to the point, we would look to do that in the context of sustainable development. You're basically joining up all the key policy areas. You're not seeing the environment in isolation, because it clearly is not in isolation. You're looking at the development agenda, what is it we need to do, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, how do we deal with those? So we go back to the concept of sustainable development and how you mainstream that in a holistic and integrated fashion. And again, that language was used repeatedly this morning. George again raised the idea, and I agree entirely with him, that the SEA should not be undertaken in isolation. It shouldn't be a separate exercise. It should be undertaken as part of the ex-ante evaluation. Key assessment tool, and it should be part part and parcel of the overall development programme, the overall ex-ante evaluation. And whatever the findings are and how they are adopted and influencing the programme should be open to being challenged by the ex-ante evaluation process. That's its role, it's a checking exercise. And again, we've talked again about the kind of consultation with key stakeholders. I made a comment about the current programme and a slight criticism in terms of the kind of lack of consultation. When I say lack of consultation, there was consultation, but it wasn't as extensive or intensive as we've had in previous programmes. And we need to get back to that. It is an important exercise. You need to get buy-in. You need people to take ownership of the process. That takes time and resources. There's no shortcuts to that. And again, as been already been mentioned, the sooner we start these processes, the better. So you can fully consult, you can take on board views and recommendations. There's times to make the necessary changes and modifications. Because we all know, we've been there, we're all running fast at the end before the new programme period starts. Again, we talked about mainstreaming environmental issues. As I say, we always go back to mainstreaming sustainable development, because social, economic, they all need to come together. Green proofing's been mentioned a number of times. And fine, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, but it tends to suggest that, you know, you're going in with a critical eye. You know, if we get this right, then it shouldn't be an issue of green proofing or indeed equalities proofing. If we tackle all these issues together, then we should be addressing them effectively in the design of the programmes. For me, what we're trying to do in the Scottish programmes is leave a legacy, a sustainable legacy that will make a real difference. And it's about process, and I don't think a lot's been said so far about the process. We've talked about procedures. For me, a large part of this is about the process and how you engage people, how you take them on board, you get them involved, you see the positive economic case. Again, issues have been addressed already in terms of engagement with the private sector. That is not easy. I mean, the Commission and others are constantly pressing us to engage with the private sector. That's a challenging, very, very challenging area. And they are more likely to be dismissive of some of these issues, to see them as constraints in terms of development going forward. But you need to work with people, you need to argue the business case, which you can do, the evidence there through case studies, get people on board alongside. And I would say, George, sorry, I probably am being very naive here. I'm not a firm advocate of legislation. I have a naive view that when you have to legislate, you've basically failed. If you legislate to address an issue, you've failed. Sometimes it is necessary, clearly, to effect change, but basically you've failed because you've not effectively engaged, you've not been sufficiently persuasive. I'm also being naive because the resources required, it's a long, drawn-out process to get buy-in, to get consensus, to get people to understand that actually you should want to do this. You shouldn't be forced to do it, you should want to do it. And I think we do need to kind of address that in a more effective way. Finally, we've often been challenged in the past by the Commission, DG Regio, in terms of the work we've done in sustainable development. Can you prove to us, you know, the impact this is having in economic terms? That's a very difficult question. It's a very obvious, very difficult question. We're still struggling with that. We can demonstrate it through case studies, but we need to find ways, methodological ways in which we can actually demonstrate unequivocally the impact. But we're quite confident that when you give weight to the environment in the context of regional economic development, it doesn't act as a restraint, as a constraint on growth. In fact, the converse is true. That you can, in a holistic, sustainable development approach, you can improve social justice, you can improve economic performance in terms of sustainable growth and jobs, and you can certainly enhance environmental performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.